Hello, I'm here today to talk to you about one of the most important figures in classical music. This is Clara Schumann, who was born in 1819. She was one of the most famous concert pianists of the 19th century, along with Franz Liszt. And she was really kind of superwoman. So she would give hundreds of concerts a year. Some of these while she was pregnant, and most notably, once 2 weeks after having given birth. Now, that's insane. Can you imagine doing such a thing? Why would she do this? She did this in order to support her family. So she was married to the composer Robert, who I believe you've probably heard of. And he was one of the most famous German composers of the 19th century, and still now today, one of the most famous composers in the world who has lived. And like many composers before him and since him, composing doesn't really put bread on the table. So the onus was on Clara to go out and support the family by performing hundreds of concerts a year. And so she did this. And on these concerts, she would perform her own music. She would perform the music of her husband. She would often give premieres of his works, and other composers of the day. This is something else that she did. She sort of changed the format of what we thought of as the recital program. So in past years, people would get up and play one virtuosic showpiece after another. So imagine going to the circus and somebody's throwing fireballs up in the air the entire time. This was the kind of idea, which sounds really fun. Great. But for Clara, the emphasis was on the music and what the music meant to her, and what she wanted to say to the audience through this incredible music. And so she selected her pieces very carefully. She also performed the music of Johannes Brahms. Now, you may or may not have heard, there's a little bit of controversy there. She maybe had a little too much fun with Brahms. We don't know for sure, and now we'll never know. So this enormously accomplished and trailblazing lady, who was the first person to go out on stage and do an entire concert from memory. When she was 18, she went out on stage and did this Beethoven Sonata from memory. The critics reacted by annihilating her and saying, how on earth could this person go out on stage and play a Beethoven Sonata from memory? Is she trying to tell us that she wrote it? How arrogant. Of course, a few years later, Franz Liszt comes along, does the same thing. What do the critics do? They praise him as a great genius who is able to hold all of these pieces of music in his head. A little bit of a double standard here, as you can see. So this incredibly accomplished lady who is doing hundreds of concerts a year, supporting the family, writing her own music, was not very confident in her own compositional ability, unfortunately. She is quoted as having said, "A woman must not desire to compose. One has never succeeded, and who am I to say that I'm the first one?" Well, I believe very strongly that her music is every bit as deserving of attention as that of Robert Schumann or of Johannes Brahms. And in order to demonstrate this to you, I have prepared the first of her Preludes and Fugues. This is Opus 16. Now, the Preludes and Fugues, there are 3 of them in the set, are a joint effort that she did with her husband, Robert, which was a study in counterpoint. Counterpoint is when you have more than one very important voice happening at the same time. And in this case, we have a fugue. A fugue, you have the same melody that occurs, it starts, and then the same melody comes in again later, and then it comes in again later in layers. So this is a very impressive feat as a composer to be able to do this. The person who has done it arguably the most successfully is Johann Sebastian Bach, who wrote 48 Preludes and Fugues in 2 books in all the different keys twice. This particular Prelude and Fugue, the first of the set, it's in G minor. It's really an incredible work. The prelude is beautiful, melancholy, lyrical, it's short. And then we have the fugue, which is in 3 voices. So what that means is that you have the same melody that occurs 3 times throughout the piece. So, for example, she starts, she has this melody, which on its own is already virtuosic enough, as if you didn't have three of them, just to make your life harder. So she comes in with the first melody, and then she comes in with the same melody again later, and then the same melody again later. And it's in three parts. So the first part is kind of straightforward. Second part, she flips it upside down. And then when the theme comes back at the end, it's a stretto. And what this means is that the same melody is played again, but they come in faster. They come in more kind of on top of each other. And it's really incredibly skillfully done. And it was so skillfully done that, in fact, her husband, Robert, when he saw them, was so impressed with the writing that as a special gift to her, he went out and had them published for her, which was a really lovely gift that he gave to her. So this is the first of Clara Schumann's Preludes and Fugues in G minor. It's Opus 16, number 1.